Some historians have estimated von Manstein's elastic defense may have significantly prolonged the war.
Manstein's ability to conduct a huge battle of maneuver and counter-maneuver, in my estimation, delayed the end of the war an absolute minimum of 3 or 6 months, perhaps a year.
But in Germany, von Manstein's constant rows with Hitler had taken their toll. His willingness to give up territory had run counter to all Hitler's instincts.
There was still an uneasy relationship between him and Hitler. I think that Hitler always realized that Manstein understood the battlefield, could manage the battlefield much more effectively than he could.
May the 7th, 1945. The Nazis surrendered.
Nuremberg, Germany, once the holy city of Nazism, becomes the setting of an epic event. Here, under the vigilant eyes of Allied military police, the 20 most important surviving members of the Hitler gang go on trial.
One of the men who would face trial was Erich von Manstein. But unexpectedly, he'd got fans on the Allied side, where he was seen as a professional soldier, but not a Nazi.
Extraordinarily, he is defended by a Labour Member of Parliament, George Paget, who speaks up very firmly on his behalf. Many of Manstein's subordinates come forward in his defence. Winston Churchill pays into a fighting fund for Manstein's defence. Manstein is tried on 17 counts. He is cleared on 8 and convicted on 9 of them.
He was sentenced to 18 years prison, later reduced to 12. Meanwhile, the world moved on. The Second World War was replaced by the Cold War. Soviet and Western forces faced each other across an Iron Curtain. On the eastern side, Manstein's old enemy, Marshal Zhukov, now Minister of Defense, amassed a huge Red Army. It vastly outnumbered NATO's forces in the West.
There was a very interesting parallel between the situation facing NATO in Germany in the Cold War and that which had faced German forces on the Eastern Front. There was a massive Soviet force stood by to launch an attack on NATO. The best way to deal with that attack would be to develop some form of mobile defense.
It was now Western leaders turned to the one obvious expert, Erich von Manstein. After serving only 4 years of a 12-year jail sentence, he was released. Manstein, the genius behind the invasion of Western Europe in the name of fascism, became the defender of Western democracy.
Because he'd been able to distance himself, in a sense, from the nastier aspects of the Third Reich, and because it was clear that he'd played a very important part in the operational successes of the German armed forces, the West was very interested in what he had to offer.
Over the following years, Manstein would become an advisor on NATO's defense against the Red Army.
I've unearthed quite a lot of evidence of war games and other material that showed that NATO had looked very carefully at what Manstein had done, particularly in his counterattack at Kharkov in 1943, as a model for the type of counterattacks that might be mounted.
Zhukov would later call von Manstein a worthy opponent.
When the war was over, Zhukov said, the one person I really regard as a capable opponent was Field Marshal Manstein.
Today, the tactics Manstein hammered out over half a century ago are still studied in military colleges, where they're regarded as not just a preeminent example of defensive strategy, but also the reason for one of the great narrow escapes of World War